Hi, Mallory.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are
Trying to
you?
get a little more light. I'm doing well.
Good. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
We will just wait for one more.
Perfect. I'm excited to be talking about this today with you and Dr. Shannon.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I think it'll be a great conversation.
It absolutely will. I know a lot of my folks are excited to listen in. I feel like there's a lot of confusion about lactose intolerance, and so everybody's excited.
Yes, there absolutely is. Sorry, just give me one sec.
Yeah, go for it.
Always,
I know it's always a little tricky getting everything set up.
always something going on. There we go.
Yes. Hello.
Hi, girls.
Welcome. We got the technical difficulties figured out. I feel like it's always got to be something, right?
It absolutely always is.
Yeah. Well, welcome to Coffee with Kabrita. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Ashley Weber, and I am the medical manager here at Kabrita USA. We are so thrilled to have two wonderful guests with us today to discuss lactose intolerance in babies and how it might relate to formula. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Shannon Seckel. She's a pediatrician in Idaho. Dr. Seckel is a wealth of information when it comes to everything baby and kid related. You can follow along with her. Her Instagram handle is at Dr._Shannon, where she gives a peek inside her life as a pediatrician and life with her two adorable little ones too. So thanks so much for being with us, Dr. Seckel.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I also want to welcome Mallory Whitmore, also known as the Formula Mom. Hi, Mallory. Mallory is a certified infant feeding technician, and she's on a mission to provide parents with formula feeding support. You can find her on Instagram at The Formula Mom. You can also visit her website, theformulamom.com. Wealth of information there, lots of resources related to babies, formula feeding, as well as options for personalized formula recommendations as well. So welcome, Mallory.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
So I just wanted to start by asking you each, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your personal relationship or experience with Kabrita and sort of how you came to know about Kabrita. Maybe Mallory, we'll start with you.
Sure, absolutely. So I formula fed both of my kids, and my second, I intended to use what we had used with my first. And so we tried that, and it was not a fit at all. And it became obvious he had some rough eczema and was like constantly congested, had trouble pooping and all of that. And I was like, I need something gentler than a standard cow milk based formula. And I obviously knew about goat milk formulas, but was wary about ordering something from Europe and dealing with importing and the risks that come with that. And so we switched to Kabrita, and it was such a good fit for us. And it was like life-changing within just a couple of days. And so since then, I've been such a huge Kabrita fan.
Awesome. Thank you. And Dr. Seckel, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with Kabrita?
Yes, absolutely. So our love for Kabrita runs deep, and I have shared this over the years. I think it's 4 years have been like very much on the Kabrita bandwagon, and let me explain why. So when I was a brand new pediatric resident, had our first, and life was just kind of stressful, schedules were crazy, and I just noticed that milk supply starting to wane over time, and so started to look into other options on how to supplement, and tried every, I mean, gosh, we tried a lot, and we just found our first struggle bad constipation, and to the point where now I would consider it almost severe constipation. And so I remember going to the conference, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and that was down in Orlando. Met Kabrita for the first time and was introduced that way. They were offering some samples, and we took them home, tried it. And well, I mean, to be honest, it was probably a couple days, and we saw great. So from that on, we were hooked, and still love it. So
Great, thank you. Great. So let's dive in a little bit on lactose intolerance in babies. So I thought maybe we should start with sort of lactose in formula. And I'm wondering if Mallory, you can give us just sort of for a little bit of context, maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about lactose in formula in general, maybe why it's there, why sometimes it's not there, and if it's not there, what someone might find. And then we'll dive deeper into who that might be for, who it may not be for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am so happy we're talking about this, because I think this is a common misconception that that lactose is somehow risky for babies, or something like that. In reality, a lot of formulas use lactose because lactose is the predominant carbohydrate in breast milk. And parents tell me all the time, oh, I just want a formula that's as close as possible to breast milk. And so I always tell them, then you need a formula that has lactose as the carb source. And lactose is in there because babies need carbohydrates. 40% of the calories in formula is from carbohydrates. And so typically that's lactose. If a baby does have a sensitivity to lactose or a lactose intolerance, then you might find something like maltodextrin or corn syrup solids or sucrose, because babies need carbs from some source. And if it's not lactose, they have to substitute it with a different carbohydrate source.
Okay, great. So yeah, so the lactose is acting as that sort of quick energy then for babies, right? Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. So Dr. Seckel, can you maybe tell us a little bit about in your clinic, in your like regular weekly, monthly life, how often would you say you talk to parents who are asking you about lactose intolerance? Maybe they think that their baby has a lactose intolerance. How often do you encounter that?
Yeah, great question. So honestly, it's all the time. I mean, it's the number one question / complaint of both new and seasoned parents. It's not necessarily all the new ones. Much that they're asking about lactose intolerance specifically, but they're talking about GI disruption / complaints of their baby in regards to GI issues. And so kind of it leads down that path. But I would say it happens weekly. And we have, a lot of new babies, and these parents are just asking all the time. So it's very frequent.
And so what symptoms are you seeing in those babies? It's mostly the digestive stuff, I guess, that the parents are asking about?
Yeah. So usually it's, my baby's very fussy and colicky and doesn't soothe easily, feel like they're gassy and kind of bloated. Sometimes they'll notice a few diaper changes, or maybe there's a little bit of mucus in that diaper, but the kind of upset tummy complaint.
Okay, great. And Mallory, what about you? How often do you have parents? I'm assuming it's mostly DMs that you're getting, or emails maybe from parents.
Yeah.
So how often are they asking about lactose in formula or lactose intolerance in your baby or something like that?
Oh my gosh, weekly, if not daily. Absolutely. And the first thing that I always like to encourage parents to remember is that because breast milk is full of lactose, breast milk actually has more lactose than cow's milk or goat's milk on its own. Babies are designed to digest breast milk outside of really specific, like congenital issues that might prevent them from having appropriate lactase enzyme, or, sometimes preemies fall into that category too. So because of that, babies are born with lactase enzymes. So a lot of times when folks DM me and they're like, I think my baby's lactose intolerant, I really encourage them to talk to their pediatrician about whether there might be actually an issue with the milk protein and not the lactose, since we know breast milk is full of lactose.
Right. Okay. So Dr. Seckel, then if someone's coming to you asking about lactose intolerance or has some of these GI symptoms, how do you go about sort of diagnosing lactose intolerance? And, of those people, I guess, how many of them actually have a true lactose intolerance then?
Right. So typically, again, it's with newborn, side of that newborn period, and it's actually really uncommon. So to have lactose intolerance is uncommon. As Mallory mentioned, babies, almost all babies, aside from a couple genetic conditions, they are born with lactose enzyme that breaks down lactose, and so true intolerance to that is actually really of 2 to 3. And so really, as these parents come in with this question, we kind of talk about more of that elimination diet, seeing if there's a gentler formula, or mom wanting to eliminate from her own diet, some options for parents. But we kind of look at it from a severity standpoint, again, with the infant. But again, it's common. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. We just had actually a good question about that. So we have someone asking, like, how do you know for sure that your baby's lactose intolerant? So is it a guessing game, or should your pediatrician be running a test for it? Sort of what's what do you typically do in practice?
I don't want to consider it a guessing game, but it often does go back down to that elimination portion. We rarely go out and start truly testing or sending perhaps to pediatric GI specialist. But as the baby, depending on how they present, we'll talk about sort of gentler options, eliminating from mom side if it's a solely breastfed baby. And then if we see more of those severe symptoms, which I know we'll talk about later on, that's when we dive another route and do further testing.
I see. Okay, so it's mostly on the severity of the symptoms that you're sort of talking with the parents about, and then doing some trial.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
And I will add here too that for those genetic conditions, specifically galactosemia, they test for that in the heel prick test that they do for newborns in the hospital, where they check for a whole bunch of genetic conditions. So if that were to come back positive that your baby has congenital lactase deficiency, you will know before you leave the hospital if you have a hospital birth.
That's
right.
Exactly. So we do the 2 screens, and it does screen for that, and we're quite fairly quickly if that it is severe. So good point.
Right. So those are the babies then you're talking about that have a true sort of inborn lactose intolerance that make zero lactase, cannot digest lactose at all. Those are the babies you're talking about that are tested for, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, great. So then I guess, Mallory, can you maybe speak to if it's, Dr. Seckel, you said most of the time it's not, like the prevalence is quite low of lactose intolerance. So if it's not the lactose that's causing some of these symptoms, then Mallory, what are you working with clients on to see sort of what that could be? And you kind of touched on it in terms of like the protein. There could be a protein issue there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always caution parents that number one, the best thing to understand as you're approaching formula issues or digestive symptoms is having like an appropriate expectation about what just developmentally normal for babies, and that some fussiness, some trouble stooling or straining or gas is just going to be normal because, babies have a brand new digestive system. But after that, if we accommodate for that, or if we, do the gas drops or try those sorts of things, then we want to look at a genetic formula, because we know that cow's milk is not entirely the same as breast milk. And so sometimes larger, more allergenic cow milk proteins are just tough for babies. So either focusing on A2, which Kabrita and goat milk is naturally A2, or extra whey protein is really important, or partially high protein, breaking down that cow milk protein into smaller portions so that it's more easily digestible. And I've found, just personally and in working with parents, that when we prioritize modified protein, it tends to have a better than just keeping milk protein intact and switching lactose free.
Yeah, okay. I agree with that too. So going back to kind of that developmental reference that you made, it's so true. I mean, they go through so much in the first couple weeks to months of their life, and oftentimes this stems from perhaps just normal newborn development. Have those rough periods, and it's normal. And so a lot of reassurance provided in the setting, but occasionally, like you're mentioning, we do have to go down that.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that it's, as a mom, as a parent, it's so important to keep in mind that sometimes these things are unfortunately just normal. I have almost 1-year-old, and we just, when something's wrong, we just want to have an answer, and we want to pinpoint why it is, because then we can have a solution for it.
Yeah,
right?
You just fix it. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think Dr. Seckel, what you said about, sometimes we just need reassurance is an important point. But as a parent, I get that, like, you just want to have a reason that your baby's unhappy, and so that you can help them feel better. Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. And Mallory, you touched on there a little bit about whey protein. So can you maybe speak to that a little bit more in terms of how you see that in formula and sort of why that's important?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about protein in milk, whether it's cow milk or goat milk or breast milk or formula, there are 2 types of protein, predominant protein. Casein protein and then whey protein. And casein protein is the curds. Like if you think about Little Miss Muffet, you have curds and whey. it's easier to digest. It doesn't create curds, which can be insoluble in the belly. So breast milk tends to have, mature breast milk, around 60% whey protein as the sort of protein makeup. Cow milk only has 20%. So I always encourage parents to look for a formula that has at least 50% whey protein, because it's going to be easier to digest and more similar to what we find in breast milk.
Okay, great. So we were kind of talking there a little bit about sort of some minor symptoms that are associated with, or might be associated with our cow milk protein. On sort of the other, I guess, extreme end of a cow milk protein allergy, which we know is different than a lactose intolerance. Dr. Seckel, can you kind of speak to the, you know, how you're seeing these babies that have a cow milk protein allergy, and, you know, how prevalent that might be, and, you know, what types of symptoms you're seeing, in case people are a little bit, you know, confused on, is it a sensitivity? Is it an allergy? You know, how do we tell the difference?
Sure. Yeah. So the allergy component is actually more common. I think a little bit opposite. You would think there's more intolerance versus true allergy, but under the age of 1, it's about 50% of infants have the true allergy. And these babies present more so with those symptoms that we were kind of referencing earlier. And so these babies can have, you know, severe bloating, kind of the abdomen a little bit, constipation to the point where you have rectal prolapse, have eczema picture where they've got this skin rash that just won't resolve, and it's more dietary related. You can have, which is interesting, so that very like stuffy nose, kind of congested, and bloody stools, mucousy stools are one of, I think, the most frequent tip-offs that I get in clinic, is when the parents bring in a diet, they're like, oh my gosh, what is this? Or they'll send pictures or show us pictures. And so that's where we, you know, I guess defer to, okay, maybe this is truly an allergy. Occasionally in the clinic setting, in my clinic, we can test that stool for the presence of blood and kind of confirm that, yes, this is truly blood versus, you know, normal infant stool changes colors all the time. That can also help confirm kind of our thoughts there.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, you know, I think maybe sometimes as parents, we always think, you know, any change is a big change for our baby. So I guess it's, you know, you're saying it's important that the babies who are really sick, like blood in the stool, like you're going to see these sort of more severe type things if it's going to be something more like an allergy.
Right. And one of the about pediatrics is that we get to follow these infants periodically over time, y'all, quite a bit in the year of life. And so we also track some of these infants that have the allergy component not gain appropriately. And so we'll also trend those growth curves with their thing. So,
right. Okay. And so for those babies those small portion of babies who are, who do have a true allergy, then if they're on a formula, what kind of formula are you recommending for them?
Yeah. So if they're a formula fed, we recommend going to more of a hydrolyzed formula that, you know, doesn't contain the milk protein. And so usually they do well. We'll like alimentum sometimes and go down that path. And usually most infants will be on this formula for 6 months if it was diagnosed early on, but it's about 6 months. And then we trial it again. We'll see if they can tolerate both dairy and or soy kind of at that 6 month mark. And occasionally those infants who are more sensitive or showing signs still go on to a year before we trial off of it.
Okay. So that small portion, like you said, it's relatively rare to have the true allergy, but you're recommending the fully hydrolyzed formula for those babies then, right? Okay. Yeah. And so Mallory, I guess for the rest of those babies then, if there's not a lactose intolerance, that's a small portion. If it's not a true cow milk allergy, then can you maybe speak to, and you kind of already touched on the whey portion a little bit, but what are you recommending that your clients look for in a formula, you know, if they're just having some of those sort of minor
like middle
discomfort symptoms? Yeah.
Yeah. So I encourage folks to look for a gentle formula which has 100% lactose, but has that modified protein or gentle protein in some way or another. So whether that's extra whey protein or even 100% whey protein, whether it's partially hydrolyzed, which means the protein is partially broken down, but not quite as extensively as a hypoallergenic formula, or whether it's an A2 protein. Typically, just modifying the protein is going to be enough. If you use a formula that has a gentler protein and you're still seeing symptoms, then you might want to go to a reduced lactose or even a lactose-free formula. But I always want to encourage folks to try switching out the protein first before you jump to just a lactose-free formula, because then often it doesn't really solve the problem, because the problem wasn't the lactose, it was the milk protein.
Right. Right. So I think at least for me, on the Kabrita side and sort of the parents that we're hearing from, those are sort of the types of parents that we typically will see do well. You mentioned the A2 protein there. So, goat milk is A2 like in that it's going to be digested more easily than A1 milk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. We did have one question here. So I'm not sure if this is related to a cow milk protein allergy or not, but if a breastfeeding mom is dairy free, when can we start to reintroduce dairy? So I'm not quite sure the context of that, but maybe Dr. Seckel, can you speak a little bit to that in different scenarios maybe?
Sure, yeah. So, and I'll give a personal example. Even with my second, was dairy soy free for him, and it took about months, and then I introduced it months, which was recommended by our physician as well, and that's what I do moms in clinic. And most infants do great kind of at that reintroduction of mom, introducing. We always say kind of reintroduce the soy first if you're both dairy and soy free. Do soy first, trial it for a week, see if symptoms return. If they don't, go ahead and try to bring dairy back into mama's diet, and then see how the infant does. And again, most infants do great around that 6-month mark, but occasionally you'll see it go, the whole year. And that can happen as well. So yeah, usually 6 months and then a year.
Okay, great. Another good question here is, Mallory, if you could maybe answer this one, how long, and I think this is related to formula feeding changes, so how long should I wait to see if a new formula is working?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I always encourage parents at the very least a week, ideally 8 days. Sometimes you might see some, it may get worse before it gets better. Sometimes you might see some additional gas or some additional reflux during that transition period. And if you switch too quickly, sometimes that can make the symptoms worse, because your baby's digestive system is like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
So try to give it 10 days to 2 weeks, just so that you can really make an assessment. You're not just seeing the transition symptoms.
Okay. And do you have any tips for parents during transition? Like, do you recommend sort of a slow transition to a new formula, or what are your recommendations there?
Yeah, I always first and foremost recommend that folks defer to what their pediatrician advises, because they know their baby best. But if there's a concern about an allergy, I always recommend going cold turkey, because you want to move that allergen as quickly as possible. If there may be a sensitivity, or you're not sure if another formula might be better, than doing a slower transition where you're doing, a graduated ratio of the new formula and a decreased ratio of the old formula over the course of a week can really be helpful.
I would echo that. I think that's great. Good advice.
Great. And then Dr. Seckel, for any parents out there who are looking to maybe try Kabrita or another formula with their baby, we know, Kabrita is fairly new. There's many pediatricians who may not know a whole lot about Kabrita. As a pediatrician yourself, what would be helpful for you if someone wants to try Kabrita? How should they approach that with their pediatrician, I guess?
Right. So Kabrita right now only FDA certified for toddlers, not infants. And so if there's question about we use it or not, please talk to your pediatrician. I mean, go in and say, hey, this is what I'm considering. What are your thoughts? And most importantly, I would bring the nutrition chart with you. So on the Kabrita website, a great breakdown between this formula compared to other formulas on the market. And, we as general pediatricians, especially not GI docs, we'd really appreciate that, because sometimes we get into this sort of mindset that goat milk is not complete and nutritionally satisfying for an infant. And so having that breakdown is so helpful. And I think most docs would agree that they love that information to review and then kind of get back on that. So I say just have open communication with your doc, bring it to the table, don't be afraid to ask. I think so many of us would be willing to talk about it. So
great. Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, that nutrition chart that Dr. Seckel is talking about is on our website. If you have trouble finding it, just email us. But there's a great nutrition chart. You can download it and print it and bring it with you, and sort of all that information is there, which is great. So there's so many great questions here that I'm seeing pop up, and I wish we could get to them all. Some of them are specific questions for your baby. So check out Mallory's website, The Formula Mom. It might be helpful, or there's a lot of resources there. So that might be helpful. I'm sorry we can't get to everyone's questions. I wish that we could. Was there anything that popped up, any questions that either of you popped up that you wanted to address before we wrap things up?
I saw one that I wanted to address. Somebody asked a question about, once they introduce solids, should they still be providing formula or should they wean off? And you absolutely should still be providing formula up until 1 year. So even if your baby's eating solids, you still want them to have ideally at least like 24 ounces of formula a day, just because formula is more nutrient dense and calorie dense than sweet potatoes, green beans, or whatever. So yes, you might see your baby reduce the volume of formula that they're taking, but you want to make sure you're still offering formula or breast milk up through the first year.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, so,
great point.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a great point. Yep. 100% agree.
So there's sort of that transition period of you're doing sort of both at the same time then.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, great. One more question, Mallory. Can you maybe just talk about some cases where you recommend, because you're talking to clients all the time, where you do recommend Kabrita? So like, what's sort of your typical mom or baby that you would recommend maybe trying Kabrita to?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, if folks express that they're interested in a goat milk formula, or if they are interested in European style or crafted formula that they can get locally, always an obvious recommendation for Kabrita for me. Often if a mom is talking about their baby is fussy or having trouble stooling, or they have congestion, but it's not, they've been tested for cow milk protein allergy and that's negative, and they want something a little bit gentler, but they still want lactose, then I recommend Kabrita. And I know you may have mentioned it, but you guys offer such a great free trial kit too, which is on your website and my link in bio as well, where you can try it for, I think it's a 24 4-ounce bottles worth.
Yeah.
And you just pay shipping. So it's also an easy thing to try to see if it helps without much investment, which is always nice. I know I got stuck in that pattern where I was buying like $35 tubs of formula and a different tub, trying to make it work. And so it's an easy one to try to see if you like before you commit to spending, a whole bunch of money on an actual can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what Mallory's talking about there is we have, Kabrita has a great trial offer. So you can go to our website, or it's also, if you go to our Instagram bio here, there's a link there. And it's a free trial. You just pay for shipping and handling. And it's about 24 servings or so of 4-ounce bottles, which hopefully, is enough to give you an idea whether your baby's going to, we talked about that transition period. So, it gives you a bit of time to figure out if it's right for your baby before you actually purchase,
right,
like you said, a whole tin. So that's on our website, as well as our bio here. So thanks for mentioning that too. So I wish we had more time and we could sort of address everyone's questions, but I think we're going to cut it off there for today. Like I said, feel free to go to the Formula Mom website. If you have other questions, feel free to message Hello Kabrita or Dr. Shannon as well, if there's something specific, if you have any questions for us. Thank you both so much for being here with us. It was such a great conversation, and I think I think a lot of people learned a lot of information. I've seen some great comments pop up that everyone learned a lot. So I think that's wonderful. You can find Mallory at The Formula Mom either on Instagram or on her website. Dr. Seckel, you can find her on Instagram at Dr._Shannon. Both of them are a wealth of information, and we're so glad both of you could join us. So thank you so much for coming. Any last thoughts?
No, thank you for hosting this. Something that I've been wanting to talk about for so long. So thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye. Have a great day.